something I really have a passion for. It's a program that has been very good to me personally over the years. We've won a number of SBIRs and STTRs now. We've also lost a bunch, and we've helped a lot of companies as they've thought through their SBIR strategy, proposal, etc. So over the next 55 minutes, what I'm hoping to do is just give you a really pragmatic perspective on what the SBIR program is, who I've seen it be most helpful for, and some thoughts around the application. And you're trying to help you gauge your chances of success. I encourage you, I kind of hate just talking because I have no feedback. I can't see you, I can't get a sense for what's on your minds. So I really encourage everyone to just drop questions into chat. I'll pause and answer questions in real time to break this up a little bit. And yeah, I really hope everyone leaves here with a little bit better understanding of this great, but I think a little bit misunderstood program. So I'm going to go ahead and share some slides that I've prepared. And yeah, like I said, please ask questions as you see fit. So this is really at the last slide, there's going to be a couple links to a bunch of resources on my website that have a bunch of guides on the SBIR program. I write a lot. I do a lot of program analysis, and spend way too much of my time analyzing SBIR program data, win rates, timelines, etc. All of that stuff is free to download, read, take advantage of. It's on my website. So that content really gets into the nitty-gritty of the SBIR program, the amounts of money for different agencies, historic win rates for different agencies. But because all of that in the weeds information is there, I'm going to try to keep this a little bit higher level and really within lens of helping you decide whether you want to take the time to learn more about SBIR. So with that in mind, let's talk about why I think SBIR is such an amazing thing, and why I have spent so much time helping people and applying for it. Number one, the headline message is I really mean this. I think that SBIR is the country's best venture capital program. And there are a lot of reasons that's true, and happy to talk more about any of these, but I just chose kind of the highlight reel here. Number one, it's if you put aside the Saudi Vision Fund, well, the Vision Fund 1 and 2, SBIR would be the country's largest VC. In fact, the volume of investments they make every year is the amount that the next 10 VCs make combined. It's an astoundingly large program that funds an extraordinary swath of different technologies. And whereas I think VC, a stereotype, and I think the data backs this up, VC is really there to help white male founders on the coasts. And the SBIR program does a really great job of distributing funds, growth capital to a really diverse and representative swath of the country, and geographically, diversity-wise. So I think that's awesome, and I'm really glad that the SBIR program is there, providing funding for people who couldn't get it through traditional VC channels. That's one reason I love the program. Second reason I love the program is that whereas a lot of government contracts require past performance, they want to see that you've done the exact same work over at VA, or that they want you to have a bunch of crazy certifications and qualifications that nobody else would ever ask for. The SBIR program doesn't. The SBIR program, there's no expectation that you've done government work in the past, which I just think makes it a great on-ramp. Yep. Yeah, someone dropped in there, America's Seed Fund. That is their official motto, tagline, whatever you want to call it. And broadly, I think that's true. Yeah, so I just saw a question here from Harriet. I have a 501c3 that has some product services offerings. Are 501c3s exempt? Unfortunately, yes. So in order to apply for an SBIR, the applicant has to be a for-profit company. Now, in the state of, you could have a for-profit sole proprietorship, single member LLC, incorporated for about $100 and 2 hours of your time. So there's nothing stopping you from, setting up your LLC and then, just being not, don't lie to the government, of course, but you can also talk about like, hey, the ownership of this product that is the foundation for this SBIR proposal is the IP is owned by this 501c3. I'm also the owner of the for-profit that has the relationship. And I think it's an administrative barrier. I don't think it's a substantive barrier, if that answers your question. So sorry. So a couple of the things great, awesome. So some of the reasons why I love SBIR and STTR. The third bullet point there is the government, I don't want to say loves, but they are totally okay with technical risk. In my experience, if you approach a VC or an angel investor and they say, hey, does your product work? And the answer is no, but here's why I think it will, they're probably going to walk away. There is just, for whatever reason, and this is definitely not a blanket statement, or this is not an everyone statement, but I think it is generally true, especially with VCs. Some angels are more open to technical risk. If there's a real question that your technology can actually work, they're probably not going to get involved. Like VCs are much more interested in seeing a product that works, but it hasn't quite figured out how to penetrate the market and its channel strategy and its pricing, and it needs marketing support. All of these market-oriented risks, VCs seem to be much more comfortable investing in companies that haven't cracked the nut on the market side, but not on the technology side. Whereas the government's like, this is a program for high-risk R&D. Great, they are totally open to your technology risk. Fourth bullet point, they don't take equity, which is absolutely amazing. If you go to any other investor and you ask them whether it's for $1 or $100 million of investment capital, they're going to expect some portion of your company's equity. They're probably going to expect a seat on the board. They're going to want to have some control over your company because they want to protect the money that they've given you. SBIR doesn't. Pretty amazing. And then the final reason, well, definitely not the final reason, but the final reason that I think are it's kind of this top 5 reasons, is that it creates an express lane for federal government sales. It is amazing how much beneficial this can be, because number one, there's just a whole contracting regime that SBIR, being an SBIR winner, opens up to you. I won't get into the details because it's a bit complicated. I've got documents on my website, read them if you're interested, but it simplifies your contracting administratively. But even more importantly, it gives you credibility and it gives you opportunities to create relationships. So once you're an SBIR winner, all of a sudden your ability to like knock on some program office's door and say, hey, I'm an SBIR winner, I've got this product that I think has some application to your needs, the response rate is just much higher. And that's a great thing, because as we all know, the government market runs on relationships. Cool. And like I said, please feel free to drop more questions in if you have any questions about this or really anything else. So I want to put a little caveat on here. So here's my caveat to the SBIR program. A lot of people think that SBIR is this like magical source of money, and it's going to fund you, and that's all your product development problems are going to be solved. That's just really not the case. So I want to talk about some things you should be aware of, especially if you're viewing SBIR as the funds that you're going to use to build your product. And on the next slide or two, we're going to talk about how I've seen more established businesses, people who already have a product or already have a service, how more established businesses can really leverage the SBIR program. So this slide is really about, for all the founders, all the entrepreneurs out there who are asking, who have an idea for a product and they just need some money to build it. So first of all, how the SBIR program works. And the best analogy I can make is that it's like Kickstarter in reverse. So, for everyone who doesn't know, Kickstarter is a website, it's a crowdfunding website where you go out there and you propose your idea. It's like your idea is to create, the next great American comic book, or your idea is to create, a blanket that cools people off instead of warming them up, or your Kickstarter is to, do something big, it's to make, to send someone to Mars, whatever it is. You're putting an idea out there and you're saying, hey, people of America, or people of the world, give me money to do this. And, if I'm successful, you'll get, a signed copy of the comic, or the, one of the first blankets, or, you'll be on the first waiting list to go to Mars. SBIR is kind of the reverse of that. Whereas with Kickstarter, you're throwing an idea up on a website asking for money. SBIR is the government is putting a need up on a website and offering to give money. So, the SBIR would say something along the lines of, we need a solution to keep, servicemen and women's cool overseas. And, that's the need. And then the solution would be that cooling blanket. Or, the government might come out and say, hey, we need somebody to help us build a vaccine for this rare disease, and we'll pay you to do it. So first thing is that for 95% of the SBIR world, it starts with a need that the government articulates, and it's up to you to propose an idea about how to solve it. So that's number one. Number two, if you're really serious about building a product, SBIR funding to me is like, if you're really serious and your heart is in, just set on building this product, then only relying on SBIR to fund it, it's like only relying on lottery tickets to fund your retirement. It's just not I don't think that SBIR is sufficiently predictable, fast enough, or frankly is going to necessarily be aligned, is going to be able to meet your needs consistently. That, there are a million exceptions. Like, I've had clients get really lucky. I've personally gotten really lucky with this, where, like, for example, very recently I won an STTR and the topic of the STTR was helping research and develop tools to shape incentives to help government and industry collaborate more effectively. Like, that is the headline of what my tools and my apps and my software and my education, everything I do pretty much is that. It's about helping industry and government collaborate. But this is the first STTR topic I've seen come out like that's just 100% aligned to what I do. And I've been looking at this world for 5 years. So, this was a great get and it was awesome. But if I had been waiting for the government to fund me to build my tools, I would have had to have waited 5 years. And I probably wouldn't have won it because I would have had nothing at that point. I would have been proposing on this STTR with just an idea, whereas I started building my software and everything else, at this point 3 years ago, and I actually had something so that when I applied to the STTR, it was like, here's my conceptual idea, and by the way, I've already built maybe 50% of the solution, and I can demonstrate my commitment and my connection to the larger solution. So if you're serious about your product, treat this as supplemental cash, not as your primary funding for your product development. And similarly, don't let SBIR distract you from your commercial goals. Again, if you're really serious about building your product, I would be attacking on all fronts. I would be looking for angels and VC and early customers and strategic investors and everything else that you can be doing to build your product. And, if an SBIR comes along that can supplement that or turbocharge that, well, that's awesome. And it's going to save you a lot of equity in the long run. But if you're really serious about your product, don't wait. Like I did wait probably a year. Well, I was like, oh man, the SBIR talk is sure to come out. It's going to come out. It's going to come out. Never came out. And so I started building my product with other resources. And, 4 years later, it finally did. So my encouragement to you is, if you're serious, just find your way to accomplish this and let SBIR be supplemental, not your primary. Okay. So that's so I've given you a lot of context and a lot of the why, because I think that the why is really important for people to calibrate, because whether this is, a free lunch and a pot of gold that nobody expected, or if this is, I'm trying to help people get a little bit dialed in on like how to think about this program and how excited or not excited you should be. So let's talk a little bit about the types of SBIRs that are out there. Now we're going to get a little bit more detail about the what. Like, what is an SBIR? So I think the best way to think about this is to think about the kinds of needs that the government has, and whether only government has the need. So like in this case, like government has a unique need, or do government and private industry, do they have basically the same need? And then whether there's an existing solution. There's a completely ready, just the government needs to buy, trucks, boom, they can buy F-150s, they already exist. Or is this a situation where the government needs something and there's a almost right commercial solution, but it needs a little tweaking to get fully there? And then there's kind of the third situation, which is the government needs something and it just doesn't exist. So as we can see in this world of there's an existing solution, well, 100% of the time, if there's an existing solution, the government's just going to buy what's already out there and not pay someone to make something new. Like, why go invent a new truck when there's a truck that's already existing? Or, even if this is a government specific need, if it's an existing need with an existing solution, there's already a government defense contractor out there who's building the solution. So why would they pay someone to build a new one? Unless there's a problem, which means there's a new need. Like the current solution isn't addressing the problem that they have. So we're going to push ourselves to the right on this slide a little bit. Then we have this middle world where, there's a solution out there. Government has a need. There's a commercial solution or an existing solution that's pretty darn close. It's not quite there yet. And this is where you may have heard about the dual use, or the AFWorks or the AFVentures, and Naval X has now started putting these out. The Army has started putting these out. They're kind of broadly referred to as dual use SBIRs. And the dual use SBIR is an amazing evolution of the SBIR program. I think it's roughly a 3-year-old program. We'll get into the details of why it has really revolutionized the space a little bit on, I think, 2 slides from now. But the big takeaway here is that it did a couple things that allows companies who have an almost right solution to get the funding they need to go from like 80% complete to 100% complete. So that's really great. And then you've got this other end of the spectrum where there just isn't an existing solution. And this is kind of the realm where government R&D really is a great funder. So, the government has a lot of different funding mechanisms. They give big block grants to universities to do like big moonshot, like cancer research, multi-million dollar research programs, or, they're going to give, $1 bazillion to Lockheed Martin to go come up with the next generation stealth technology. All of this sort of fits under the header of the government has a need. There is no existing solution. So how is the government going to fund people to create a solution. Well, for big expensive stuff, they're probably going to do big competitive grants and R&D contracts to universities, federal funded research labs, big contractors. But if it's a smaller need, a couple $1 million of research that will get them a solution, that's where SBIR steps in. So that's really what SBIR does, is there to do. I really just want to take a pause on that. Like this is a lot of information, and I feel like I'm going fast. So does anybody have a question? Please, drop it in the chat. I don't want to run past anybody on any of this. All right, well, there'll be time for questions at the end, and like I said, feel free to drop some more in the chat. So I hope everyone now has a little bit of an understanding of like why SBIR is there, why it should be interesting for government, why it should be interesting for industry, and kind of the what of the SBIR program, the what of the kind of the couple different flavors of SBIR. So I'm not going to get a ton into the how. Like there's an entire mechanics process with an RFP that drops that comes out on SBIR.gov or defense. But anyway, there's a whole process that we could go into, but I think this is going to be mostly focused on I really, if you're interested enough at the end of this conversation to want to know more about the process of applying. Again, I'll share the links to all the resources that I've written where I go into a lot of detail about process. But like I said, we only have an hour, so I feel like I wanted to keep the conversation at the why, what level, and I'll show you where to find the how. Just saw an email or a chat come in. Is SBIR primarily focused on product or specialized services too? Great question. If you had asked me that question 18 months ago, I would have told you it was only products. This dual use, these AFWorks, NavalX, these dual use SBIRs have really expanded the aperture of what they'll fund, and they have been funding some services. Not a lot, but it's happening. And so yeah, so if you have a specialized service, it might be worth applying. Yeah, so as of very recently, services are now on the table. It's still a very small portion of the total SBIR ecosystem, but the door's open. Cool. So I just want to talk a little bit about the different archetypes of people that I've seen. So if you're on this call, I assume you're somewhere on this list. You're kind of on one of these. You're one of these U's. And so I just would like to just share a little bit of perspective on which kinds of entrepreneurs I've seen have the most success with SBIR. Will they fund travel services in SBIR? If you mean, can you include travel in your budget? Then the answer is yes. It's like any other government contract. You can budget for travel under the GSA per diem rates. If you mean when an SBIR to provide travel services to the government, it would have to be something innovative, I think. Like if you're providing standard travel, consulting and travel support services to the government, then sorry, so travel services. So yeah, if you're saying, can you budget for travel in your proposal for your SBIR? The answer is yes. If you're proposing to provide travel services and you want to propose that under an SBIR, I think it would be difficult. Yeah, I think it would be difficult. Looking here, why is it difficult to have the government pay for the development of an app, for example? It's not. A couple of the SBIRs that I've had funded were for apps. I mean, app is just it's just software. So if you are creating software that is going to be deployed on government networks to address a government need. I would say, I don't know, maybe a third of all the SBIRs are software centric. So I don't think that developing an app is a barrier. I just think the real question is like, what does the app do, and how does the app address a government need, and why would the government want to pay you to build the app? So yeah. So yeah. So if I said that it's difficult, then my apologies. So yeah, I just want to talk a little bit about I'm assuming that the people on this call are doing all kinds of different things. Some of you just reading the comments or the text, it's like some people, it sounds like, are doing services companies. Some people are maybe, established product companies. Some people are, maybe just looking at this for the first time and, just dipping their toe in federal. So I want to try to give you a little bit of a sense for, based on the nature of the companies that I've seen go after SBIR, which ones have seemed to be more successful. So the first, and I wrote these out in the order of what I think, kind of from the most successful to the least successful types of SBIR applicants are. And by the way, when I say SBIR, please, it's SBIR and STTR. Everything I've said so far is just as applicable to STTR as it is to SBIR. Just shorthand. So, and by the way, when I say successful at SBIR, I don't just mean successful in winning the SBIR. I mean successful at winning the SBIR and turning that SBIR win into more than just a one-time cash infusion. I'm talking about like how the companies that have actually taken that SBIR and done something with it that has really helped move their company forward. So the people who I just think I love it every time I hear a company tell me this. It just makes me happy. Is the company that's providing an existing service to a government customer, and they are trying to find, and they've seen a problem in their government customer's life cycle, in their world, and they know a lot about that government customer and the processes and procedures and the technology stacks. And then they see an SBIR come out that they know, if they could solve it, would help their existing government customers. This is just a wonderful situation to be in. And for a few reasons. Number one, I think the chances of winning are just much, much higher because everybody gets to read what's in the SBIR proposal documents or the solicitation documents. But companies like this are using their customer intimacy, their customer knowledge, their understanding of the customer's needs and lived experience to really provide a much deeper understanding of the ask embedded in that SBIR topic. And when they write their proposals, it's really compelling because they're speaking as somebody who's been, shoulder to shoulder with their government customer for years at times. So number one, if you've been providing a service to a government customer related to that thing, it's just, it allows you to craft a much more compelling proposals, number one. Number two, it's like win or lose, by going through the process of writing the proposal, you're actually helping your company get really crisp on some thinking around product development that you can then fund internally and then sell. So it's like there's no lost investment of time by building the proposal and going through the mental processes of thinking through the work plan, thinking through the technology that you want to build, thinking through the marketing of it. Like that's all going to bear fruit in some. That's time well invested, no matter how the SBIR itself turns out. And then finally, for these companies, if they actually do win the SBIR, now they've got an amazing, and they've already got the customer, and so they're actually building the product with their customer in a very collaborative way. And when they do build it, they've got a group that trusts them, that they have access to, that they've got contracting connections with, that makes the sale very easy. So for all of these reasons and more, existing services companies who want to branch out into product as a complementary business line, I just think it's awesome. I've seen this work out so well for so many people. Cool. And so for all of you who fit into that description, highly encourage you to go like track the SBIR topics and find one that fits and go to the races. Second group that I've seen do really, really well with SBIR are people who just want to do R&D. And I've seen this with a lot of people who, they're coming out of, maybe they came out of a master's or a PhD program, typically STEM backgrounded people, and they just love being in the lab, and they just love researching and experimenting with code and with chemistry and with all the other things that made them do that master's degree in the first place. Well, now they're getting to do it, but they're getting government funding to do it. Now, I'll be honest, this answer is not necessarily great from the government's perspective, because the government doesn't want you to do a bunch of research into a product that just goes nowhere. They want you to do a bunch of research into a product, and then you commercialize it and turn it into an actual solution they can buy. But that's the government's problem. That's not your problem. And if you just love doing research, well, this is a good way to get that funded. So cool. The third group, and is the people that I see going after SBIRs, are the ones who are using SBIR as a way to break into the GovCon space. As we've discussed, a lot of government contracts ask you for past performance. They ask you to demonstrate that you've done this sort of work in a previous customer. SBIR does not have those requirements. So for that reason, SBIR can be your on-ramp into the GovCon space. I think this is a tricky avenue, because this is like, if you play pool, this is like your bank shot. This is like the, instead of you're not going to just like hit the ball directly, it's like you're going to pop it off of a wall so that it comes back in, and it can be done. But my experience has been that this takes people off focus, because they want to start a services company doing blank, and they're doing a slightly misaligned SBIR as their way to get in. And it can be done. It's a little cumbersome. There are probably better ways to get into the game if that's what you're ultimately trying to do. And then the fourth group of people that I think go after SBIRs, and I don't mean this, I put this at the bottom not because it's the worst. In fact, it's the most common reason why people go after SBIRs. It's because they want the government to pay them to build a product that they want to have. You have a vision for a product, whether it's an app or a physical product, or it's a vaccine or a something, and you don't have the money to pay to do the development yourself, or you don't want to pay for the development yourself, or you don't want to give up all the equity to do the development yourself, so you get the government to pay for it. This is great, and I understand why people do this, but frankly, it's a lot risky, because what happens if you don't get the SBIR? What's your plan now that you've waited 6 months on SBIRs and you don't win? Or what's your plan now that you've invested a couple hundred hours into the proposal and you don't win? So it's just you need to be very aware of the win rates and the amount of investment you're going to make before you decide to put the time in to create this proposal that at best probably has a 15% chance of winning. So just want people in this space to go in eyes wide open. And since this is such a common reason people go after SBIR, happy to talk more about this situation. So cool. So now that we've got a little bit more about the kinds of people I've seen be most successful with SBIR, just want to take a little bit of time to talk about what it takes to win. And this is my, this is not written anywhere. This is just my observations after helping lots of companies for a fair while go after them. But whether you're going after traditional SBIR or dual use SBIR, you need three things. but they're slightly different 3. So on the traditional SBIR, the long pole in the tent, like the really hard thing in my experience, is waiting for the government to put out a topic that aligns to something you care about. So like, somebody was asking about developing apps. Well, if all the SBIR topics are about like material science and communications frequencies and antennas and vaccines and, shelf stable transfusible blood, like you can wait a long time before a topic comes out that is going to be in your strike zone that would actually help you build your product. So that's number one. The number one thing is you need to have a topic that you want to do. So once you have a topic, then the next thing you need to do is you need to have a compelling idea about how you're going to address that topic. And theoretically, you can start researching on, the day the topic comes out, you say, oh, there's a topic around antennas. I'm going to go research antennas and I'm going to come up with a really interesting solution. I'm going to propose that. You can do it. It's been done many times. The win rate on that approach is extremely low. Just because, there are, no matter how obscure the topic, there are thousands of people in the US that have dedicated their life to that thing. So if you're starting from scratch, or you have sort of like a generic idea, it's like, oh, I kind of sort of know about that. Here's my kind of, armchair quarterback thought about how I would solve that. People have one doing that, but I would think really hard, because you're going to invest 100 hours or so into a proposal, and somebody else out there has been spending the last 5 years thinking about this and has really exciting, compelling solutions, and they're almost certainly going to win. Cool. And the third thing that you need on the traditional SBIR side is you have to be credible. So again, this is a competitive space. So for every topic that comes out, the government will award 1, maybe 2 solutions. Will award SBIRs to 1 or 2 solutions that they receive. So why should they why should they think that you have the technical capability to build the solution, to manage the team, to be administratively compliant, to commercialize the product, and actually turn this in from you building a widget to you building a revenue positive, a profitable company with that widget? So why are you credible? So think about that in relationship to everybody else who might be applying. But when you have all 3 of those things, it's pretty much free money to go build something that you care about, and it's awesome. So, having been in both the winner and the loser, when these 3 circles come together, it's incredible. And it's allowed, speaking personally, it's allowed me to build my products while keeping all of my equity. And it's why I'm so passionate about it, is because of how good it's been for my business. And I want more people to take advantage of it. Now turning our attention to the dual use SBIR. The rings are similar, but they're different in an important way. The big innovation of the dual use SBIR is that it doesn't specify a topic. Well, they generally don't. And there's a lot more flexibility in the need. So let's say that let's say, just going back to this travel concept, let's say, I'm really passionate around, whatever, jet propulsion. And that the Navy has a need around jet propulsion, and they may not have ever put it into an SBIR, but because you've been doing your research and talking to friends and whatnot, that this is something they need. You get to propose your own topic. So all of this drama on the traditional side around having to wait for the topic to come out, that all goes away on the dual use side, because you're identifying your own topic. And that change is really what's caused the dual use SBIR to like take government acquisitions and government innovation by storm. So you get to identify your own topic, but you really need to understand it. If this is, you can't be just like, oh, I was talking to a buddy and he was complaining about blank. Like they expect you to really understand the need that the government has. So number one, you need to really understand the need. And it can't just be like a peripheral, it'd be like, oh, it would be nice if kind of need. This has to be like a really like, this is something that the government's going to care enough about to fund you to solve it. Number two, because the aperture is so wide open, because they're letting you identify your own topics, the government expects you to have solved, and so I put 80%, that's an arbitrary number, there is no magic number, but the government's going to expect you to have done a lot of stuff in this space already. Like they don't want you to show up with kind of an idea on a napkin. They're going to want to see that you've done some real work to come up with a solution already. Preferably you already have a solution to a similar problem, like 80% of their problems already been solved, and you just need to build that incremental 20%. And then the third ring, very similar to the traditional SBIR, is credibility. So there's a real danger in this dual use track of people just proposing nonsense and pretending that they have a solution when they really don't. So they really scrutinize the credibility of the team proposing. So they're going to want to see, that you've got degrees and work experience and, testimonials from customers and all sorts of things to prove that your solution is real and not just a nice idea. Cool. So those are my perspectives on what it's going to take for you to win on either track. So you have a comment got some comments here. How would the traditional SBIR relate with specialized services having credibility and compelling ideas, but how would you open it? So I have never seen services funded under traditional SBIRs. I've only seen services funded under the dual use topics. And credibility and compelling, yeah, you're just going to have to demonstrate that you've been providing this service to a lot of commercial customers, and that you're going to have to, you'll probably want to, it'd be best like you've published on this topic in, different guides and academic articles, and your writings have been picked up by newspapers and you'd want to be able to show that these legitimate companies have purchased your services from you, things like that, to give you credibility that you can actually deliver. See a couple more questions, a few questions. Address as many as you feel appropriate. Explain the difference between SBIR and STTR. Yeah, so SBIR and STTR are conceptually the same. The difference is that STTR, with SBIR, you're applying by yourself. You've got your LLC, and maybe you have a subcontractor, but you're applying as a standalone entity that's managing it. With STTR, you're applying as a paired team between you and a research institution. So yeah, basically your STTR requires the pairing, and yeah, there's some pros and cons. And if we have time at the end, I'll talk more about that. Alan, there is one SBIR program, but operating 11 different ways depending on agency mission. Yeah. So every agency is putting out SBIR topics that are aligned to their mission. So like if you do stuff in agri-tech, you're probably looking at Department of Agriculture. If you're looking at making vaccines, you're probably looking at HHS. Then Department of Defense just does like everything, because Department of Defense is massive. So they have their own defense health agency. So it's like, yeah, there's you're most likely to find topics that align to your concepts from the agencies that have missions aligned to your interests. All of the agencies do have slight variances in their program. The major contours of the program stay the same. All the stuff we've talked about stays the same. There are differences in like proposal length, proposal content, how they look at how they assess credibility. things like that. Yeah. So yeah. So then the phases, yeah. So the phases, I have a lot more on this in the resources I'll link to. Since it's been asked. So SBIR is a 3-phase program. The first 2 phases are for R&D and that are directly funded by the government. So phase 1, kind of the, whatever you want to call it, the tagline of phase 1 is that you're there to create a proof of concept. Really the phase 1 is there to just sort of prove the technical merit of your solution to the problem that the government's laid out in their topic. And then the phase 2 is there to do so you kind of, if you think about research and development, kind of the research is more your phase 1 development, where you're actually building the solution that you've proven could be created in phase 2. Yeah. And then phase 3 is not really a phase, it's the time after phase 2 where you are trying to sell that solution back to the government and to commercial customers. And then policy directives and other reference material. Yeah, it's all. I'll share the link where you can find all of that at the end. So thank you for the question, by the way. And some final thoughts. So yeah, coming back to the difference between SBIR and STTR. So STTR, as we discussed, it requires you to team up with a research institution. The bad news of that is that research institutions are going to typically want about half of the money under the award. And research institutions have extremely high overhead rates. So the amount that you get compared to the amount that you're awarded can be a little skewed. Plus working with students and academics it's just a little different. I'm not better, not worse. I'm doing it right now. And it's a great relationship. And I feel very lucky that I have my research institution, but you have to go in eyes wide open and really get to know the other group before they don't operate like companies. That being said, STTRs, in my experience, if you're concerned about this credibility, are you credible? Teaming up with a research institution that is highly credible in your space, basically it's like, hey, government, you don't have to believe that my solution has merit and that I'm able to deliver, but this very prestigious institution believes it. So if they believe it, you should too. So some pros, cons of STTR. A couple of other thoughts. NSF is an amazingly flexible funder, but there should be a but there. But you pretty much you either need to be a PhD or you need to have a PhD on your team. NSF, a lot of people get attracted to the NSF SBIR topics because they're extremely flexible and extremely broad. But NSF expects you to have they expect you to be splitting the atom. They're the technical expectations there and the technical innovation that they're looking for from their winners is very, very high. Which generally means that you need to have a PhD level understanding of the topic and of the state of the art and what the 10 years from now state of the art could look like. I've seen a lot of people chase after NSF because it looks so promising, but without realizing this somewhat hidden credibility barrier in there. Third bullet: build relationships, trust, and credibility. A lot of this is a promise. You're promising the government that you can do this research. You're promising the government you can do this development. With those sorts of big promises comes a lot of skepticism. So you're going to need the more that you can build relationships now with the SBIR program officers to help them trust you and believe that you're credible, the better off you're going to be. Next bullet point: if you need money now, SBIR-STTR is not a good fit. Even the fastest SBIR programs, like the Air Force dual use program, has radically shrunk timelines to award and get people money. It's still if you're looking for SBIR as something that's going to fund you in the next couple months for to start your development and production and build your product, it's just not going to happen. Minimum, we're talking about 3 months. Much more likely, we're talking about 6 to 12 months to actually get your funding under SBIR-STTR. So again, this is one of the reasons why I think that SBIR and STTR are so good for existing services companies. Because as an existing services company, you're delivering your service, and 6 months from now you find out that you want an SBIR. Well, high five, go have a nice dinner, and then you just integrate that SBIR work into an overarching workflow with an existing pool of people to help you out. So sorry, that was a bit of a digression, but it's a pain point I've seen. And then last is kind of very much tied into that. It's SBIR, I have found, is very challenging for first-time product developers for all of the technical and credibility reasons, but it is amazing for building out existing products. Like if you want to build version 2.0, you want to build a big new module onto a product that you already have, SBIR-STTR is hard to beat. So those are my final thoughts. And then this is some resources. I think we're running low on time and I want to get some time for questions. So if you're interested in finding out, we provide a lot of education, tools, guides, analyses, resources around government contracting in general and SBIR and STTR in particular. So please come to the website, download the stuff, it's all free. And so yeah, that's my presentation. Apologies I was going so fast. There's just a ton of content. So we'd like to open it up now, and if you'd like to go off mute, happy to just ask your questions or put them into chat, and we'll get through as many as we can. Good.